Hi, I'm Bud from Strum Supply. If you're like most of us, the first thing you did after you started learning to play the guitar was go out and buy a chord book. And when you opened the book, you found all these strange names for chords. Augmented, diminished, seventh, major seventh. If you want to understand chord names, you're in the right place. Stay with us. We're going to drill into chords today. Keep it simple. We're only going to look at E chords so that you can understand the difference between an E major, an E minor, an E7, etc. And so we're going to build off of the information we did in the previous chord theory lesson. We're going to take the chord formulas that I previously presented and understand how to translate those formulas into chord spellings. And once you have a chord spelling, you can then map that spelling into a chord form that you play on your guitar. So we're going to look at E chords today. If you want to learn a lot about E chords and understand how they fit together and how they vary and why they have different names, you're in the right place. Stay with us.
In this lesson, we're going to build on some of the concepts that we've learned in previous lessons. And since you may be watching this lesson without having seen those, I'm going to touch on a few of those points. And for others, this will just be a review. So first of all, it's important to remember that the chords are built off of formulas, and those formulas are based on the major scale. So what I've done is illustrate example of the major scale. The major scale always has 7 notes. In the key of C major, you have all the white keys on the keyboard. And in the key of E, you have a combination of white keys and black keys. And in this case, we're following the same formula: whole step, half step, whole step, half step. And that's what this means right here. So that is the formula or the structure of every major scale. We're going to spend all our time just looking at E chords today, but these concepts apply to any key and to any chord family, if you will. So, of course, again, this is a bit of a review, but I've shown this table before. There are formulas for chords. Every major chord is the major triad, and it uses the first, third, and fifth note in the major scale in that key. And so in the case of E, if we were going to talk about E major, it would be the first, E, the third, G sharp, and the fifth, B. So we're going to take this formula and we're going to build on this some more detail. And now this is going to be a little theoretical for a bit, so hang in there because we're going to translate this back to actual chord forms on the guitar. So what I've done is, this is the table we were looking at before. I've named the E chords that we're going to discuss. And of course, most of us have a chord book, a chord encyclopedia, and you can look it up and you'll see lots more chords. You'll see, E add 9 and E11. And so I'm not going to get into all of those more sophisticated chords, but I'm going to continue to illustrate the E major scale at the bottom that allows you to quickly look at, review, check my work. So the formula for the E major we already talked about, the first, third, and fifth. So this is 1, 3, and 5, the fifth note in the E major scale. In the case of a minor chord, what changes is that the third note is flatted. So you flat the third, and that becomes the minor chord. So that would be E, and G sharp flatted would be G and B. And so here you have the spelling. And this is important because spelling the chords is the way that makes it easy for you to then translate it back to the fretboard and to the forms that you're creating, the notes that you're using when you create a chord form on your guitar. So I'm going to skip down to E7 and illustrate that one. In the case of sevenths, you're now adding the seventh note in the scale, or some some form of the seventh note. So in the dominant seven, the formula is the 1, 3, 5, just like the major. But what you do is you add the flatted seventh. And so this chord will look just like E major, but we add the flatted seventh. In the case of the E major scale, the seventh is D sharp. So when I flat it, it becomes a D. Okay, so the spelling of E7 is no mystery. It follows a formula, and you can map it out yourself by just looking at the major scale. The difference between the dominant seventh and the major seventh is that the seventh is not flatted in the major seventh. I haven't talked about this, but you have minor thirds, minor sevenths, major sevenths. So this actually, the flatted seventh is a minor seventh, and this is a major seventh because it's not flatted. And in this case, then the difference between these two chords is that the seventh is flatted for the dominant seventh, and it is not flatted for the major seventh. And then for the minor seventh, what changes there is it's like E minor. See, it looks exactly like E minor, except you've added the flatted seventh. And so this chord, the only difference in this chord and E7 is that you've flatted the third. So you can see quickly that these formulas can be translated into spelling for the chords. Now let's actually look at what those chord forms would look like on the guitar and talk about how those chord forms actually are a realization of the formula itself and the spelling that we just created. So I'm not going to go through every one of these, but of course E major, the notes that you are actually playing when you play this chord form on your guitar is you're playing an E note. On the A string, you're playing in the second fret, so it's a B note. On the D string, you're playing in the second fret, so it's an E note. On the G string, in the first fret, so it's a G sharp, an open B, and an open E. So the spelling that we have here is consistent with the only notes that are being played are the notes that are in the spelling of the E major chord. E minor is the same situation, but remember the only thing that changed between E major and E minor was flatting the third, or going from a G sharp being played to a G being played. So what I've done here is indicate what is different in the notes that we're playing in this chord form from the E major chord form. And it's the G sharp got turned to a G. Okay, now let's talk about the E7. Spelling again, you'll find that the only notes played across all of the strings are one of the notes in the spelling. And what is different from the E major spelling or the E major voicing of the chord and the E7 voicing? Well, what's different is that there was an E played here, and now we're playing an open D. Why is that? Well, we needed to add that flatted seventh note. And so by taking your finger off of the second fret on the D string, which would make it an E major, simply lifting your finger turns it into an E7 or E dominant 7. And then you can go through the rest of these and see the same thing. What changed in the case of an E major 7? Well, instead of turning the E into a D, you turn the E into a D sharp. And so this is your major 7th version. So E major 7. And then E minor 7, what happens here is what's different from the E major chord is just like an E minor, we have to have the G, we have the G, we have to add the D, we have the D, we turn the E into a D, we turn the G sharp into a G, you have the E minor 7. Hopefully it didn't go too fast, but this is just to show you that you can map these out and they all make sense. I want to make one more important point around chord spelling and the way that you can take that spelling and create chord forms. There are many ways to play a chord. As long as you spell the chord correctly, in other words, all of the notes that you're playing across the strings that you're striking are in the chord spelling, then you are playing that chord. So here's 3 versions of E minor 7. And this is not the only examples. I could take any chord, but I just chose E minor 7th because it's one that is pretty easy to illustrate. So first of all, this is a very simple fingering. In the first position, you're playing a B on the A string, and that gets you this chord is E, G, B, and D. We have a E, B, D, G, B, E. So only thing you're playing are the notes that are in that chord. In this next fingering, you have changed the sequence, and that's called the voicing. So the way when you play the chord, the way that it's voiced is the sequence of tones that you hear. The E and the B are the same, but what was a D becomes an E, what was a B becomes a D, but you still have the same notes, right? So this is just another chord form that produces a E minor 7. This E minor 7 will sound different. It will have a different voicing than this one, but they're both E minor 7 chords. And then just to illustrate that there are many ways to play a chord and in different positions on the guitar, what I'm using here is the A7 chord form in a bar chord on the 7th fret. And so this becomes, once again, a E minor 7. The reason I put the B in parentheses here is that although it is true this B fits into the chord spelling, generally you would want to have the root note be your lowest note. And so a lot of times when people are playing this chord form, they will mute this string, and that gives you an E as your root note, and the voicing of that, for some people they prefer that. For beginners, I would encourage you to not worry about it, and it's just fine to play that B. You're still playing an E minor 7. So that's the essence of the lesson, and once again, here's the table. This is really the crux of the lesson. I hope this was helpful. I hope I didn't go too fast. Please come back for future lessons and give me comments on how we can make this more useful.